On the floods, it's time to talk about weather, climate, disasters and priorities. You see, the problem here is that the climate alarmists, the fearmongers, the nutty activists and the media hysterics, well, they do have a real impact. They do end up doing real harm and inflicting real damage because they have an impact on policy. Think about the flooding we've been seeing in the Nepean Hawkesbury system over the past 18 months. Shocking and costly floods in early 2021, then again this year, and then again now. Severe flooding, nowhere near record flooding, but repeated severe flooding. So forget climate change as the cause. As you can see from this graph, flooding has been regular and there's been worse flooding many times over the past century and even back into the 1860s. So the question becomes, how do you adapt to this or mitigate the natural cycle of floods? And that's why a proposal was floated more than 25 years ago to increase the height of the Warragamba Dam. The idea was to hold more water back to reduce flooding, to control flooding and avoid disaster. By increasing the height of the dam, it would store enough extra water to fill Sydney Harbour 2 times over. That's the scale of the impact of this dam wall heightening. But it's never happened. The plan was rejected by the state Labor government in 1995. And repeated studies have continued, and politicians have supported it and rejected it time and time again. And there have been objections, of course, objections by environmentalists because of more bush being flooded and wild rivers disappearing under the lake behind the dam wall. There have been objections because of Indigenous cultural sites that would be inundated. And there have been objections from the United Nations, for crying out loud, because of all these possibilities. And so, as usual, nothing has happened. And we've ended up with repeated severe flooding now that might have been a whole lot less damaging if the dam wall had been raised a decade or so ago. But still, right to this moment, the politicians dither and they don't want to back common sense.
We'll get appropriate advice on those issues. Those issues, of course, are controversial. There are different views that need to be taken into account. What's clear is that we need to get through the immediate crisis is what we need to do, and then we need to examine any policy response which is required.
Just get on with it. Just raise the damn wall. We've been dealing with the immediate crisis repeatedly now for the past couple of years. How many more years do they want to waste? Still, think about the past 2 or 3 decades. What else has been happening? Yep, the climate change debate, the global warming hysteria. And the focus of that has always been on heat and drought. Even though the science tells us that the warmer the planet is, the more moisture and rain there'll be, the activists in Australia especially have always been ramping up anxiety about heat waves and droughts. The former Climate Commissioner, Tim Flannery, said Australia would be in permanent drought. I mean, who could forget this?
Even the rain that falls isn't actually going to fill our dams and our river system. Even the rain that falls isn't actually going to fill our dams and our river system.
You see, that's the sort of nonsense that's been pushed for decades now. And while you and I might rate Flannery as a fool, governments listen to him. They listen to him and others like him. A federal Labor government made him Chief Climate Commissioner. So it's little wonder we didn't build new dams or increase the height of existing dams to protect ourselves from floods. Because these numpties were telling governments the rains wouldn't come anymore. And governments were silly enough to listen to them. So you know what the politicians did instead? Yep, they built desalination plants. In Sydney, they spent $2 billion on a desal plant that's never been needed, but still costs millions of dollars every week just to keep in working order. In Queensland, Victoria and South Australia too, billions of dollars have been spent on desal plants that have never been needed, and they still cost a bomb, all of them, just to maintain, just in case we do need them one day. Now, just think about the idiocy of what this country has done. We've been either too cowardly or too stupid to build more dams or increase the size of the dams we've got, and we've built desal plants instead. Now Sydney is again seeing trauma and tragedy like this, another damaging and deadly flood, and while the water rises and homes go under and the water keeps powering over the Warragamba Dam, we know decades of talk about raising the height of the dam wall has amounted to precisely nothing. They've done nothing. But all the while, down near Botany Bay, there is a multi-billion-dollar desalination plant all prepped up and ready to go, just in case anyone in the Sydney Basin needs any more water right now. Water everywhere, and a desal plant in case you need a drink. That tells you more than anything else about how climate alarmism distorts our political debate, actually leads to damaging policy choices, and we all pay the price.